Namaste. So, last time we had taken up aspiration in this series of reflections on foundations of yoga, and today we take up this aspect of rejection. As we know that in Sri Aurobindo's yoga there is a triple labor, and it is aspiration, rejection, and surrender. This is the triple labor because often people ask, "What should we do?" Now here the doing is all inside. It is not something outside that we wear a particular dress, we use a certain outer attire, or we sit in a particular way. All these things may have their place for some people, but the real labor goes on inside. And it is a triple labor. Triple labor is aspiration, rejection, surrender. Of these, the most misunderstood is surrender and is the most important one because you can't walk the path without surrender. The most important one without which we don't start the yoga is aspiration. Many people don't have a conscious aspiration. There is no yoga without aspiration. One can have faith in mother's protection and one will receive. Mother speaks of that there is a difference between doing yoga as a disciple and simply being a devotee. Devotee and disciple, this is the difference. So, devotees can be anywhere and wherever you call for protection and grace, you will receive it. That has been an ancient truth. But to walk the path, it is aspiration. There should be a conscious aspiration, well formulated. The more clearly formulated it is, the better it is. So one should be very conscious why one is walking the path. That's why the mother speaks of, in her very first conversation in 1929, what do you want the yoga for? It's not enough that we go stay in a particular place, whether it be an ashram, monastery or anywhere, and we say that we are and go sit together, have collective meditation, have some bhajans. It's not enough. What is the aspiration? That is what the divine sees ultimately. So this is one part. But just as aspiration is the positive movement of sadhana, it is the flame that is carrying us upward. So rejection is the negative side of the whole yoga. By negative side, I mean there is something which we have to remove from the consciousness to make space. So we have to understand it like this. Our consciousness is filled with many things, all kinds of thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, impulses, passions, all kinds of movements of nature, obscurities. And if they remain, then when the divine comes, he can still come inside. But if there is no conscious consent from us to remove it, not only a consent, we are attached to those things, then the effect may be quite disastrous because the divine may start picking up and, putting things outside and we may not like it because we will start losing things which we cherish. So that is why a conscious rejection has a place in sadhana. It's not that the divine cannot do it, but if there is no personal effort, then we are not supporting the action of the divine. So the divine wants us in freedom to reject certain movements. That is one. Now, when people read about rejection, there are few questions that arise in the mind. The first is that one is absolutely in awe. My God, I have to do these things. This was most common problem. Oh my God, these things I have to remove from my nature. Things which we do not even understand. Because it's not just about the Shadripus. Right from the mind till the physical consciousness. Obscurity of the physical consciousness. Now, we don't understand what it really means. Dullness, inertia, who is not prone to these things? Mind's ideas, opinions, constructions. All the time the mind is creating constructions. All these have to be demolished. And then of course we know in the vital nature all the jealousies, attachments, fears, lust, greed, all these things have to go. Now this is a big list, ambition. So how to go about it? So Sri Aurobindo gives us number of hints and the mother helps us there. But first we start with this question that someone has asked, that how to know. It's based on one of the mother's conversation where she speaks about refusal to lower things. Now the question is, how do we know whether it's a suppression or it is actually a rejection? Now the first thing is, suppression is a conscious process. Suppression doesn't do that harm as we think it to be doing. But if you suppress it and forget about it, definitely it will one day explode. So here mother is speaking of refusal, which is different from suppression. The idea is whether it's a suppression or not. Now, when you do when a process is conscious, it's very different from when it is unconscious. Now, in psychology, we use two terms. We use repression and suppression. So you won't find the usage of the word repression in mother's writings. But repression is what happens unconsciously. And why there is repression? Because as we grow up with certain idea of good and bad. And that mothers explain. So whenever we pick up any aspect of the yoga, we have to read through the entire range. That's why often this short bit of conversation, it's not a very good idea. It is all right to start with. But my suggestion is read everything that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have written on rejection. Then one will have a total picture. So to start with, there are many things in our nature which we are not aware of. Ask any human being. They will say, I am good, nothing wrong with me. And it can go to what extent? Where Sri Aurobindo uses it very with a sense of humor, that medieval ascetics shunned women. Why? Because they thought they are the ones who open the door to hell. And what they will say every time they fell, they would blame the woman. Not realizing that it is your own, some defect in your nature, some problem in your nature. It may not be your nature, it may be universal nature, but nevertheless you have to look at things as it is. Actually, there is nothing like personal nature. But to start with, one has to understand that repression is an unconscious process, and it is certainly not the... It means that we are not even conscious of the things, and when people repress things and they really believe that they are the best people, good people in the world, they sometimes people create images of being that as if they have no defects and the defects are always in others, then that is not a good sign. It's a sign of unconsciousness. But as we grow, we become aware of things in our nature. And there is a stage when we become aware that, my God, everything that I saw in others is inside me. So this is the next step. Then the process of conscious process starts. Now in this conscious process, there are three ways of going about it. One is refusal. I don't let it enter into me. That is what is there in the passage. So what refusal means? It enters the thought, pushes the impulse, but you don't translate it into action. You refuse it. It's like, I was hearing some very interesting story that Gurkhas don't have abuses in their language, which is something so wonderful. So once there is a Pakistani army climbing up and abusing, so the commanding officer doesn't know what to do. So he tells the Gurkhas, why don't you people abuse? And they can't abuse. They are supposed to listen to the commanding officer and they can't abuse. Because over the period of time, they have learned that this is something, even if the impulse comes, they will not express it in action. This is refusal. It comes, but you don't express it. Second stage is when you reject the whole movement, the vibration, the consciousness as it is entering, you feel it, sense it, it requires a great degree of development and you keep it outside. And the third is where there is an expression. For each of the things there is a remedy. So nothing is irremediable to start with. Now what happens when you express? Because many people who have come to yoga, see, mother is speaking to children. So right in the beginning she is educating them. We have to understand the context. That look here, refuse these lower movements. Because children were prone to abusiveness. She's not talking about any particular lower movement. The entire mind to physical is lower. Everything is falsehood, if you see from that point of view. So she is telling them that if you lend yourself to these impulses of all kinds, whatever comes in your mouth, you speak. So you feel angry, you express in anger. So it is not good. You have greed, you start eating a lot. So all this when you express, then you have created a groove in nature. Once you create a groove, there is a tendency for it to go again and again. And the more number of times you do something, it becomes as they say, you do it once, it is an action. You do it repeatedly, it's a habit. You do it habitually, then it becomes part of our external character. But many of us who have picked up these things before we came here, before we were conscious, that's why the mother reminds, I am telling you these things so that you become conscious right from beginning. Now, most of us don't receive that kind of education. It's unfortunate. Schools don't even bother about these things. Ambition and all this is a way of life. Anger is not regarded as abnormal. But when we come to yoga, now what to do? Because it has already come. Its poison is spreading into the system. So there is a very interesting writing of Sri Aurobindo, and there is a very beautiful hint of the mother. Now the writing of Sri Aurobindo, he says that when a tendency in nature is very strong, like in adolescence, certain tendencies are very strong. So that's why in adolescence, Sri Aurobindo and the mother were not keen on taking disciples at a young age. And Sri Aurobindo said that because at young age there are many tendencies. You have ambition, for example, you have lust. All these movements are very natural in adolescence. Rashness. So if you take early, initially people will come, but very soon these movements will come because they are part of nature. And it will lead to a very difficult situation of intense conflict, which can be very draining to a human being. It's not easy, this inner battle. So they were keen that after some experience of life, usually around 30s, you have some experience and you come. So what is meant by that experience? A tendency which is once born in nature has to go through its course. And she spoke even interestingly in terms of a disease. She said, best is you feel the disease and you say, no, I don't accept it. Like what it means for coronavirus, it means I don't accept in its reality. People will say it's denial. No, I believe in grace. This is one aspect. You reject it right from beginning. But if there is fear, it takes a door, enters. Now what it will do? What should you do? Now you call the grace. Now what happens when you call the grace? Does it mean you'll have no symptoms? No, you will have symptoms, but you'll go through the cycle very fast. It will be cut off eventually from your nature and you are not likely to suffer from the consequences, which can be very serious. So you'll touch grace, maybe do a little dent, go away, and then the dent will come back. So there are tendencies of nature which are there in human beings and they go through a process. And that process Sri Aurobindo describes in one of his very beautiful writings, which is called the process of evolution. It's there in Essays Divine and Human or Essays in Philosophy and Yoga, one of them. But the essay is titled Process of Evolution. So he says once a tendency expresses and you try to coerce it, which is where the question comes, it doesn't help. Now this is there in the Gita. The Gita says, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that it's your nature to fight a battle. If you try to do nigraha, it will not help because you are not a born sannyasi. So the word is, how will coercion help? There is a tendency in nature. It's not about good or bad. The entire nature is filled with ignorance. So if you try to suppress it, as the question goes, suppress by that means it's come up in your nature. How do you do it? So Sri Aurobindo says that you have to go through Sanyama. Sanyama is different from Nigraha. Nigraha is, I just put a lid over it, which is what now we are coming to conscious suppression, where you just put a lid over it, you don't see it. It is there, you know it. It will come up time to time, it is showing up in different ways. And then one day it bursts forth. Then again you put a lid over it. Again it bursts forth. Again you put a lid over it. This is one way. But Sri Aurobindo says that better is the way of Sanyama, that it will express itself, observe, make it, less crude, make it more, learn, practice some self-control. Slowly you go through that process. And then as you go through that process, a time comes when the tendency becomes weak. If you really observe the evolution of this process, you will see it, that certain defects of nature, certain difficulties, certain problems, wrong movement as they are called, initially, one is not even conscious of them. And one is merrily going on the road of yoga, thinking that you are doing wonderful. Then you begin to become aware. You don't even know that this is something to be rejected, even though you have read it. Then you slowly become aware. Then you start the process. But it doesn't, it's like famous prayer of Saint Augustine. It doesn't go away easily. So it comes back. Then you try to practice Sanyama. Sanyama means you regulate it. See, that is why there's the difference between marriage and when you are practicing yoga alone. In marriage, what happens? There are certain tendencies, whether it be anger, lust, greed, over a period of time, it becomes weak, as they say, because you are used to certain things. But now it is vital has created a different kind of world, which is also necessary, because in marriage you are regulating it because of social pressure, because of moral notions, not because you are changing inside. So in marriage you are not provided with any kind of opportunity where you may actually this tendency can come out in a more universal way. So one never knows, one just dies with it. Whereas when there is a freedom, as you see either in the ashram or when you see in life today, life freedom is a way of life today. So these tendencies can express because the moral, social lids, they are gone away. So now comes the real Sanyama, which is not because of any other reason, but simply because you make a conscious choice that I'll try to, have some kind of. Now each one will do it in their own way. But slowly, let's say you are getting very angry. So the first step of Sanyama will be, you got angry, you burst, and then immediately you realize that it's something, it was not a good thing. So you sit down, a quarrel took place, and you just concentrate, you call peace, peace, peace. You read, you pray. Then slowly you will see that even if the expression has started, after some time you stop. It doesn't take a very abusive or horrible form. Some of the people who write, it's so illustrative, someone very beautifully wrote a very interesting letter that someone wanted the child to be studying in a particular school. It's a very beautiful way of going about it. So I'm just sharing it. And the husband got very annoyed when the lady mentioned it to the husband. No, wherever I have decided, there the child will study. So temper, and got up and went away. Now this lady, while she goes and starts cooking, because she's a psychically very awakened lady, so she starts looking at it in a different way. First step is step back. She also got caught in the moment and of course temper and all this. Then she sees okay, he has reacted in an egoistic way, but let us keep that aside. What is the truth? Then the truth she discovers it, basically he is worried that if my daughter goes to this particular college, she may actually, get distracted. So he says, okay, the consciousness is not bad. It's correct. I mean, he has his viewpoint, which it's not out of anger that he is doing, not because he wants to rigidly do things, but because he is concerned about the daughter. There is love inside the heart, not just something outward. Then she goes further, says but he gets angry. Well, it is his nature. It is his nature. He has to change it. I can't change his nature. This is his nature. This is how it is. So that is the second step. So that brought peace. Third step is, okay, what I can do? Praise to the mother and offers it. Actually, this is the way the psychic will lead us, step by step. You step back and look at the whole thing. Now you have expressed anger. It happened. Or here it was somebody else in the environment because of which one got caught up in the vibration. So Sanyama is a process of gradual awareness, and gradually you are increasing the strength against the tendency. Now where does the strength come from? Comes from the aspiration of the soul. If the soul power is not awake, and we start doing all these things by the mind, surely one will go into a very deranged state. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo have spoken about it. So the first movement is aspiration. Rejection comes later. Now this is one of the problems that happens when one has entered into the yoga and one reads all this and starts practicing rejection. Whereas there is another place where Sri Aurobindo says, and the Mother also says, the stress in yoga should be on aspiration. It is only in this yoga where you speak about rejection. In other yogas, you don't even speak about it. You just speak about Sattva Sansuddhi. In this yoga, because it's transformation, therefore we speak about rejection. It's important. But yoga can be done. There are many experiences you can have without the decisive conquest over lower nature. It's the last ultimate conquest. Also, start cleaning things which are easy to clean. If you start tackling the final enemy, then it will sap your energy completely. So, emphasis should be on aspiration. Let the aspiration grow. Let the fire grow. Now, when the fire grows, the tendencies begin to start melting. It's like the iron which begins to melt at a certain point. Now, what do you do if the iron is not melting? A point comes when you feel it is red hot. You have seen lohars, no? These smiths, what do? I've actually seen it. Very interesting. So they put the iron in fire. Then a time comes when he picks up a hammer and puts a hammer. It makes a sound. The smith knows it's not yet ready. So what he does, he further increases the light, the fire. And it goes on till a time comes and when you can actually break the rod with little effort. So the Sanyama process is like that. Now Sanyama will not work if you don't help the psychic flame to grow. So give the psychic maximum food. This is the basis. So as the psychic grows more and becomes more and more intense, you will see that this tendency is melting. So what took you a long time even to become aware now becomes weaker and a time comes when it has become so weak, how Sri Aurobindo describes Sanyama, that you can practice Nigraha and it will go away from your nature. And he's talking about, of course, the very difficult things, because there are always three kinds of resistances in human nature. And it's different in everyone. It's not like everybody will have the same, that is one thing we must understand. We are very acutely aware of other people's difficulties, but we have our own share. Everybody has their own cross. That is what it is called, our own share of burden. So what happens is that there are tendencies which are easier in our nature to get rid of. But there are things which take some time, but you can get rid of. There are some which will be last pockets. He says it will continue till your last points. If you read Savitri, you will see Ashwapati has gone through psycho-spiritual transformation in book 1 and book 2. Now what happens in book 3, very interesting, if you see the second canto or the third canto where he stands at the doors of, house of the spirit, a last and mighty transformation came. What is that last and mighty transformation? Before that, what happens? Then Ashwapati makes a great act. He sees that how falsehood enters like slippery grains. And so that truth can stumble in. He looks at it. That how falsehood seeks heaven's leniency. What is heaven's leniency? Never seek that. Mother, forgive me, there are people who do this and again good. This is not a good movement. I will keep doing and I will just do this. No. Heaven's leniency, mother, forgive me, I am like that. What can I do? No, you understand there is a problem and you pray and aspire for help. But it is not like, okay, I seek forgiveness, tomorrow again I'll do. No. So he sees that a point comes when he sees, now this is the last pockets of resistance. They are like slippery grains. Truth will come and stumble in. I don't want to elaborate what these can be. They can be idealizing emotions, something which you think are very nice, but they are not, because they are still based on falsehood. So what he does when he sees that now I am waiting at the doors of the unknowable, the supramental cannot find room inside until this last sacrifice is done. So he does a Purnahuti. What is Purnahuti? He says, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. Now imagine, I received once these 3 lines sent by somebody who had just entered into the path of yoga. I said, it's all right, you please, you want to circulate it, but you must know when Ashwapati tried it. If you try it prematurely, it will be like a backlash. And that actually happened in that person's life. Because initially you feel ki I have no problem inside me. What is there? I can tear it like this and throw it, because you don't even know that it is like Rakta Bij. You tear and you see new sprouts will come. Keep doing it. So there are steps and stages of the process. The last resistances, the mother says, they will pursue you right up to the last point. You will have experiences, again they will pull you, again they'll pull you. And when you cross over it, it's like the final shadow. Then you are all beauty, all light, all bliss. But everybody has to face this battle. It's a battle. Without a doubt, it's a battle. That's why we can't waste time over finding other people's faults and defects, because we have to fight our battle. It's no use in saying, such person has this defect. That's what every mystic has experienced. No, bura jo dekhan main chala, mujhse bura na koi. There is no sin in this world which is not mine. Sri Aurobindo's aphorism. Another place where he speaks about, and which gives us another clue, is that there is some experience which Sri Aurobindo describes, and then he says, I discovered that little point of jealousy. Now, can you imagine? Sri Aurobindo writing an aphorism in 1912, 14, that's when they were written. So people ask the mother, what is this? How can, then mother explains something very beautifully, and that's the real cue. Where does jealousy comes from? It comes from the sense of I-ness and my-ness. As long as you have the ego, some trace of it will be there. This is the knot. If you don't destroy this knot, and where is Sri Aurobindo's that last knot? He is breaking it in the physical consciousness. So that's because all other levels he has done the work. But ego can pursue us to a point where, so that's why yoga is not meant for everybody to start with. So, but it's good to understand the landscape. People go to different steps, different degrees. But we should not postpone anything for next life. Okay? We should, once you take to the path, it should be this life, whatever happens. But then you are on fast forward track. So then she says that what is the real difficulty behind all this you read about rejection? It is the identification with the ego self. This is me. As long as this is me, you will keep, it will wear 1,000 masks and it will spring up. And the worst is when you say, this is me, the ego self, and a time comes when you say, oh, I have such beautiful experiences. Now this is me. What is me? I am a sadhak of the integral yoga. Now this is a very dangerous mask. Spiritual ego. So the forces say, now I got it. This is the royal door for their entry. And they will put you down again. As long as ego is there, and ego doesn't go like this, that today it is there, tomorrow it's not there. There's none of the experiences happen in yoga like that. She says there are many steps of preparation, then one day it drops off. Mental ego may drop off at some point of time. You may enter into vastness. Emotional ego may go away. But it still sticks to certain levels. And it is a very, very laborious working. So ego is the knot. And how it is described, very interestingly, when in another context, when mother was asked, mother says, don't try to wash the stains one by one. You see the list? I want me to read the list in the mother? List of stains. I'll just quickly read. See, how many? All that has to be done. Just the list. What you have to reject. Rejection of the movements of the lower nature, right? Okay, now read the list. Rejection of the mind's ideas starts from there. Opinions, preferences, habits, constructions. Even about the divine we make constructions. Divine is this, yoga is this, not this. What do we know? So that the true knowledge may find free room in a silent mind. Now, constructions may be helpful for a person at a stage of evolution. They are like scaffolding. When you are making a house, you make those baska, bahar mein na, you make those ladders to stand and work. But that is not the house. So constructions are like that, temporarily necessary. Rejection of the vital natures. What? You have to reject desires. Start by rejecting one desire. Mind's preferences. No. As I was saying, go green, vegetarianism, organic. Start with one thing. Vegetarian people are good. Non-vegetarians are all evil. People who don't drink and smoke are yogis. Those who drink and smoke are evil people. Start with one thing. Hitler was a pure vegetarian. He never drank anything except human blood. See, constructions. Plenty of constructions which lead us into trouble because we see anybody like, I had grown up in that atmosphere where smoking and drinking were considered bad, and of course vegetarian. So I grew up thinking I'm a good guy. Why? Because I don't drink, smoke. I went to one of the places where they have gurus and they were very keen that I should. I said, no, I have my path very clearly. No, you're already half satsangi. I said, why? Because you don't drink, smoke and you're a vegetarian. This is the main thing. I said, oh, is it? This is nothing. I have the ego that I am a vegetarian. So many things which come into play. So start with one thing. Rejection of the vital nature's desires. Demands. Desires, okay. demands, expectations. I want this. This is mine. So, cravings, sensations. Oh, this is foul. Equanimity. When somebody sits by your side who is very, very horrible smell, God is making you practice this rejection. Uff, kaise log hain? What kind of people who come? Finished. So you see, sensations, passions, selfishness, pride, arrogance. This long list, huh? It is not ending here. Lust. What is lust? Lust is not just kamna. Kamna is desires in general. Lust is wanting to possess. Lust for power. Lust for money. Anything you lust after. Somebody else's possession you want. That is lust. So lust is not just sexual. It is, of course, there. But here Sri Aurobindo has used the word lust. Lust is somebody else's possession and you are eyeing that I want to have it. Oh, he has a car. I wish I had this car. This is lust. Oh, he is sitting on this position. I want this position. This is lust. Greed, jealousy, envy, hostility to the truth, so that the true power and joy may pour from above into a calm, large, strong and consecrated vital being. If you see the list, it's actually in sequence. What is the easiest to the most difficult ones? Last is hostility to truth. Rejection of the physical natures, stupidity, doubt, disbelief, obscurity, obstinacy, pettiness, laziness, unwillingness to change, tamas, so that the true stability of light, power, ananda, may establish itself in a body growing always more divine. If you read the list, you will say, Lord, thank you. Now, remember, rejection is between two things, aspiration and surrender. Don't start handling it in isolation. Aspiration we have spoken about. Surrender is where Mother speaks about it. In fact, she uses the word not rejection but offer it to the light, so that these movements may be transformed. Certain movements you cannot transform. Wickedness has to be thrown out. Deceit is to be thrown out. But there are movements which can be transformed. And what these movements can be, if I tell you, it will be sometimes very difficult to believe. But Sri Aurobindo has spoken about certain movements which can be transformed, which one may think that, they are not transformable. So what we have to do is, we have to keep offering them. And as you offer, but sincere offering, it's not just, okay, Mother, I am giving to you, and then you start again. This offering must be from the very blood and fire of the heart. Mother, change this. I remember once something very interesting I experienced with a group of very senior people, and a youngster like that time, you think, oh, tore desire up from its bleeding. I've also gone through that phase. What is there? Lower nature, you can just throw it away. So there was a group of people who had been very mature in yoga, whom you can respect and I won't name the people. And there was talk going on about somebody, because I was involved because I had to give some opinion. I said, oh, these people and all, some of them said, don't speak like that. I said, why is he telling me not to speak like that? I'm just speaking truth, frankness, straightforwardness. Then later on, one person, after some time, made a remark. Very amazing remark. I still remember it. He said, I know what this person has done, and really something which I feel is heinous. So then he said, you don't know what must have gone on inside his consciousness. That time I didn't understand. Now I understand. What must be going on inside? He's in something which by no standards, whether spiritual, moral, you can justify it. It has nothing to do with moral or ethics. It's something you just don't do. It's dark. It's really ugly, wicked. But the person said, you don't know what must be going on inside. And then you understand that how the mother, in her freedom and compassion, allowed certain things, certain people, despite certain movements which otherwise ordinarily you will say it is just not accepted. So when Sri Aurobindo writes all this, he is not writing from a moral ethical standpoint or social standpoint. It is a yogic standpoint. Means you will otherwise fight a battle. There is no other way. So keep offering them to the light with a will and aspiration that may they be transformed. Sincere aspiration. You will see that after a time something becomes weak and goes into the background. Then it may come up again. So the quality, she says, which is required, because some battles will be very long. Some, she has said, will pursue you till the end. So she says few qualities you must develop. Faith. Don't give up. At no point say, oh, impossible. No point, till the last moment. Don't postpone it. Next life. There is no next life. Forget about next life. Do it in this life. With the divine help, everything is possible. Even at 80, 90, do it in this life. This should be our attitude. What the divine does is a different thing, that destiny and all. But this should be our will. Then, when it comes, again you'll see it becomes thin, thin, thin. I'll give you an example of a yogi who had many followers. I think some people must have met him. He used to come to dining room with a lot of followers, and now he is no more. At 100 something, somebody asked him, how is your, you have gone through such a long process of yoga, traditional yoga and Sri Aurobindo's yoga. So he asked him about certain tendencies like sexual attraction. He said, now it is like pani par agar, if you put a stick, for a moment there is ripple and there is this thing, and then you take out the stick, it goes away. So when I had heard again, young age, I said, my God, it still pursues. How can it be? How can it be that, pani par lakir and these are things you can just conquer like that. But because there is the subconscient, the reason one has to understand in yoga, at some point in ordinary life, we are living in a very limited consciousness. But by the process of yoga, two things will happen. Your individual consciousness at some point will open into the universal. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of that you will become a representative of difficulties in others. So when it opens to universal, what happens? There is nothing like your nature. You meet somebody and you will catch a contagion. That's why you see many places the mother in the beginning phases explains why one has to be careful, whom we are meeting, what company we are keeping. Because it will be difficult to practice yoga if we don't have some kind of, shield around ourselves. You will get it. You just can't help it. And when you enter the universal consciousness, then even if you don't step out of the house, you will get it. Because you are now carrying many things from everywhere. Truckloads of things. And the second thing which will happen is the subconscious will, at some point, one should not try all these things prematurely. Sri Aurobindo was asked this question. Psychoanalysts talk about subconscious. He said, yes, but in yoga you don't do it till the light comes. And the light will open it. And ideal is if you can let these things be released in a subjective state. Meaning thereby they have not become objective. They are there as tendencies, strong fantasies, pulls, imaginations, tugging at every part. And you keep offering. That is the ideal state. Sri Aurobindo says that if you leave it to God, He will remove your sins subjectively. But if you take it on yourself, you will go through much pain and suffering. Eventually, there is no doubt that once one has turned to the divine, but understand the difficulty. I have read a book on Brahmacharya by Swami Shivanand. One of the big challenges in yoga. So at the end, he describes many processes, method, techniques, bandhas, everything. At the end he says, but ultimately only by the grace of God it goes. So we have to lean upon grace. This is the lessons he says. Keep leaning upon grace. Yoga cannot be done by personal effort alone. At some place, somebody said, "So, mother, can one not, like animal, transformed into human being by their own effort? So why can't human beings be transformed into Superman by their own effort?" Mother laughs and says, "Just try it. Just try it doing." Thing is, even animals didn't get transformed by their own effort. They were not conscious of the power of nature. But as human beings, in the beginning itself, if we learn to lean upon the grace, that's what surrender is about. That we do our bit. It may be a small bit, whatever it is. That effort should be there because it supports the action of the grace. And then you rely on grace, surrender it. Then your effort will also increase, the grace will also act. Because when the subconscious and the universal nature begins to pour in, the challenges are going to increase and you have to keep on relying on grace. But the fundamental thing about change of the sheet completely, I was talking about, we had stopped, don't wash the stains one by one. She says, one mystic told her. And she said, he's very right, one Sufi mystic. You know who was the mystic? It was, in all likelihood, Inayat Khan, who even came here when Sri Aurobindo was in guest house. And he wanted to play music so that Sri Aurobindo can hear. And he played downstairs and Sri Aurobindo was upstairs. So he was a mystic. He died in 27 or something. Ustad Inayat Khan. So he said, we don't believe in washing stains one by one. We believe in changing the whole chadar. Does it mean? Keep pushing towards discovery of the divine and the psychic being. Don't get caught up in all the battles. Countless battles will come. This was the mistake that Arjuna did. And this was the saving grace also. What was the mistake? Abhimanyu's time, somebody challenged him and he said, I'm a Kshatriya, I'll take the challenge. Shri Krishna tells him, don't do it. But the grace was that Shri Krishna was with him. So that is the time Abhimanyu is killed during that process. So don't get caught up in battles. Yes, one must, but you will see that there will be moments when you're caught up. Preoccupation should be one, divine, divine, divine. Then one day you will see, we experience it, that suddenly there will be either the psychic state or the divine presence. And then you know that this is nature, this is you. You don't make the mistake of identifying yourself with nature. You know you are not that. This gives you a great advantage. Anytime you want, you can step back and be free. Otherwise, you think this is me. Then what happens? Depression, guilt, much worse than the actual problem. Guilt and depression, they are the direct action of hostile forces. Oh, I got angry again. I am a horrible person, unfit for yoga. Read through Sri Aurobindo's letters. I think I made a mistake by taking up to this path. Now, this is hostile force. This is more dangerous than getting angry. I mean, relatively. So one has to understand that this is now not a good thing. Some other forces are using this moment to attack me. So you have to be like a samurai who knows, but change of consciousness is the fundamental thing. See, in traditional yogas, people don't talk about rejection, still they arrive at realization. The divine consciousness experience, even freedom from ego, fundamental ego, not physical ego, which is very big term. It doesn't need a complete rejection of all these things. You have to do it, and a time will come when your nature will have this much readiness that it will allow you to pierce a hole through and discover the divine presence. When that happens, there is a change, there is a reversal of consciousness. Fundamentally, अंदर में चादर सफेद हो गई है, good material. And then you can wash the stains much easily. There are fabrics which are very easy. But there are others where you try little force and you say, I went to mitao the daag, kapda phat gaya. So first thing is change the chadar inside. And lean on surrender, lean upon grace. So rejection is between aspiration and surrender. It's very important. There is no doubt about it. But it is to be done steadily. It's a process. It is not, in fact, Mother says, if you do it from a moral standpoint, you will never be able to do it because you will never offer, not even see. There is a place where she says, moral notions prevent surrender. How? Because the moment you have good and bad, then Mind will not allow you to see bad in you. There will be always a very good explanation for what is within us. We'll paint our being with a very good image. Nothing wrong in me. Even when you say there is something wrong, it will be very nicely put. I have only one mistake. I easily trust people. ये तो अच्छी बात है. इसमें mistake क्या है? That is why I am fooled. No, nobody is fooling me. My own nature is playing the fool. This is sincerity. As long as we think others are fooling me, we are far from cultivating sincerity. So sincerity is a quality we must ask for. Faith is a quality we must ask for because it's a long journey. Endurance, equanimity, and most important, she says, perseverance. So she says, victory comes to the most persevering. And she uses the word, 1,000 times you may fall. You must be ready to get up 1,001 times and walk the path. This is not a justification to fall 1,000 times, but it shows the spirit in which we must walk the path. It's a mountain climb, and as you come nearer, you will see the difficulty increases. It doesn't reduce. Oh, so many years of sadhana. People ask sometimes this question. Oh, somebody has been doing yoga for so many years. Now I give this analogy. Even recently somebody was asked this question, and there was question answer format, and said, but such a senior sadhak staying for so many years in the ashram, it was about corona. Somebody says, you may stay for many years in the ashram, it is no proof. No, that is not the correct fullness. The more number of years you have practiced yoga, it is not to do with years you have stayed. That of course is obvious. But if you have practiced yoga, the more number of years, the more difficult challenges you are handling. Who faces the ultimate challenge? The Bahubali, Senapati. He's not, who fought Drona and Karna and all these people? Arjuna, where mortal blows could come. And I give this very simple example. When you are taking a journey to Mount Everest, up till 6,000 feet, it's lovely. Yoga. Yeah, bas, I have to climb the Mount Everest. Very good. Mountain chadna hai na, it's so easy. Then 10,000 feet you feel a little hypoxia. So you say, okay, I have to get used to, so you stay. That's why in yoga you'll have moments when you'll be static. Stay. Catch your breath. You get used to. Take a little oxygen, grace. Then you walk again. 16,000, very good. Now, you see, after that, I know people who have gone up to the last 100 feet of Mount Everest and fallen back to base camp. Treacherous climb, avalanches, snowstorms, blindness, loneliness. You had a porter carrying your luggage and he died. You're alone in that wilderness. Nobody is there by your side. All your friends who thought you are a good guy have left you and gone. Tata bye bye. And you are alone. Now who will stand at that moment? One who has from the beginning remembered that I am never alone, but the divine grace is with me. Only that person. That is why in the Gita, Arjuna says this, it's impossible to practice all this yoga you are saying. And Krishna has not even spoken of rejection. It's not there in the Gita. He says, how can one practice this yoga? So what does Shri Krishna say? He gives two hints. One, he says, Swalpamasya dharmasya. Arjuna, even if you practice a little bit of it, it will free you from much fear. First hint. Second, he says, well, there are people who try by their own effort, tapasya, pantha duratya. Ultimately, I am supporting them, but they don't know it. So they feel very lonely, treacherous. You fall, path of tapasya. You are holding by your own efforts, monkey, baby monkey. The day you let go, you fall precipitously, endlessly in some ravine. But if you are walking with the grace, conscious of the grace, then he says, it will be delight. So what does it mean? You will not fall. Sri Aurobindo says, even in sunlit path you will have difficulties. But what will happen? When you fall, he will let you fall this much. And then he will say, what you fellow? And you will say, what you fellow? My friend, you let me come here. And you say, okay, okay, I want to teach you some humility. Okay, now come, hold my hand. And you will reach. So, the path of tapasya and the path of surrender. If you try all these things with your own effort, no embargo, one can try it, but Sri Aurobindo has said, surrender. Surrender to the divine and infinite mother is the main process of this yoga. It is the beginning and the end of yoga, the middle of yoga. So beautifully he says, mother is the beginning, mother is the path, and mother is the goal. Such beautiful sutras. Another place he says, remember that the mother loves you. Because this is how hostile forces enter. Oh, I am no good, I am a useless person. Mother must have also condemned me. Fortunately, she doesn't do that. She doesn't judge or condemn. Mother is the path and mother is the goal. Remember that the mother loves you. He is not even saying, remember that you love the mother. Remember that the mother loves you. Base your life on that. And everything will be all right. So base must be correct. Foundations of yoga must be correct. Fundamentals should be right in the right place. And then a long journey, wonderful journey, dangers, difficulties, challenges. But what is there? Divine is walking with us. He is there. Sometimes we may not look at him and we may be too glued on the difficulty in front. And we may think, oh my God, gone. Abhi girne wale hain, abyss. Then what should we do? Turn back and say, please hold me. He'll say, I am holding you. You don't realize it. So from the beginning itself, if we can have that attitude of surrender to the Divine Mother, challenges will come because she has to teach us. She has to make us strong. So she will not take us like this, like cuddly babies. Cuddly babies is okay, infancy of yoga. But then the warrior baby, the baby must become a warrior soul. But she will fight our battles. She will be by our side. But we have to go through the Kurukshetra and the battle of life. There is no shortcut about it. The Kurukshetra is there. It's part of life. And if we are afraid of battle, we are afraid of change. We are afraid of evolution. We are afraid of transformation. We have to go through the battle. This is the inner war without escape. But if we lean on the grace, like Arjuna, the first thing that he does, he has these foundations correct. Fundamentals sahi the. Bande ke, as they say. Lord, be with me. I won't raise a... You will have to fight your battle. I won't fight your battle. Doesn't matter. Be with me. See the symbol? It's such a beautiful symbol. Battle you will fight. You will lift the bow, arrow, get over your emotions, weaknesses, fear. You will have to fight. Okay, I'll fight, but you will be with me. Yes, I'll be your charioteer. So what Shri Krishna does? Crucial moments he will intervene. Sri Aurobindo says the relationship of Krishna and Arjuna is symbolic of the divine dealings with our humanity. When the action is taking a certain course and men are driven by their egoism, the divine allows the action to take its natural course. But at all crucial moments, his intervention is felt. That's how Essays on the Gita starts. So what happens in Mahabharata? Look at it. Arjuna is doing everything. Krishna is sitting very quietly. When does he intervene? When he gives the promise, tomorrow if I don't kill Jayadratha, I am going to go to fire. He said, why do you do such impossible promises? But प्रबल प्रेम के पाले पढ़कर प्रभु को नियम बदलते देखा, अपना मान रहे न रहे पर भक्त का मान न टलते देखा. He sits and he makes sure that there is an illusion of night and Jayadratha is killed. This one place where he intervenes very concretely. Second place where he intervenes, when Karna shoots the Takshak, that astra, there is no tod for that. What does he do? He presses the rath and it goes down and whizzes past Arjuna. It showed death. Third time, when Bhishma has disarmed Arjuna, nothing doing. Next shot, Arjuna is gone. That is the time we see Krishna jumping into the battlefield, picking up the wheel and says, I am between you and Arjuna. What does Bhishma say? You broke your promise. He says, yes, promise is not dear to me, my bhakta is. Those who rely on bhakti have this big advantage. So, he stands between Bhishma and Arjuna. Fourth time, when Ashwathama fires Narayanastra, there is no tod for that. Arjuna doesn't know what to do. Nobody knows. Bhima is standing with his mace. Shri Krishna says, you cannot fight Narayanastra. Bow down. Everybody bows down. Forcibly he catches Bhima and puts him to ground. And finally, the last time, when many other times without knowing, but these are documented moments. And of course, how Bhishma is killed and Drona, all that is different story. But I'm talking only of Arjuna and Shri Krishna, symbolic of the divine dealings with humanity. When the war is over, of course, Karna, how he saves him from Karna, takes the chariot to a point where they can fight 1-to-1. And then he says, here is the Divyastra, shoot him. People have blamed Krishna. Arjuna is a virtuous man. Shri Krishna says, blame me. But my lover and devotee shall never perish. And finally, when the war is over and as per the protocol, the charioteer has to come down and ask the warrior to come down. Shri Krishna says, no, you get down first. But Lord, you are breaking the rule. I have always broken rule, Krishna says. I don't follow the rules of the game. I do follow them, but there are points where I break it. Okay, he gets down. Then Shri Krishna jumps. And as he jumps, the whole chariot goes in flames. So nobody understands what has happened. Many places, Ghatotkach coming in the forefront because he knew Karna could kill him. But here, people don't know what has happened. He said, with the kind of arrows that Karna and Dronacharya, they had hit your Rath, long back it would have gone away. But I was just holding all this, taking upon myself. And now, Rath is no more needed. So, I pushed you out and then I've come out. It would have finished long back. So, lean on bhakti, lean on surrender, devotion, faith. They are the ones which will ultimately, and they will be tested again and again. Trying times will come, but those who are carried by God, the Divine Mother in their lap, remember the promise of Shri Krishna, the same promise Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given, but in a much greater way. My devotee never perishes. He cannot come to a bad end. So the ultimate truth of all this is try all these practices. At the end, you reach a point where you say, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. This is what Krishna tells. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of it. He says, strength, if it is spiritual, is a great power. A greater power is sincerity. But the greatest of all powers is grace. And then he says, how many times have I not reminded you of the phrase of the Gita? Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami masucha. Abandon all dharmas and take refuge in me alone. I shall deliver you from all sin and evil. Do not fear. Namaste.